I've talked about metro systems all across Europe on this channel, from Madrid to Helsinki and Oslo to Vienna and Milan. But one system for which an explainer has been painfully absent is Brussels. Brussels has one of the most interesting metro systems in Europe, as well as fantastic trams and steadily improving suburban trains. And Brussels, for what it's worth, is weird. There's the metro, but also the Premetro, which is half an extension of the tram system and half a metro lying in wait. The topology of the network is also quite all over the place, and they sell fries in cones covered in mayonnaise, which, depending on your outlook, may be either the greatest or worst thing ever conceived. So let's dive in and learn the ins, outs, and loops of Brussels' rapid transit system. Brussels is located centrally in Belgium and lies roughly in the middle of Paris, Amsterdam, and London, and with a regional population of around 1.2 million people. Running southeast to northeast through central parts of the city is the Brussels Canal, which connects Brussels to Charleroi to the south and the sea to the north by way of Antwerp. Within the city, which is rather hilly, making for very interesting transit routes, there are three major stations along the primary heavy rail corridor, which passes through the city parallel to the canal. Brussels Midi, or South, which is served by Eurostar trains to Paris, Amsterdam, and London. Brussels Nord, which is unsurprisingly to the north and connected to its sibling to the south by a cross-city tunnel, as well as the underground Brussels Central, which is located right in the geographic center of the city, close to several famous attractions, most notably the Grand Place, a giant square which plays host to a number of beautifully ornate buildings, including the City Hall. To the west of Brussels Nord Station is the city's main business district, while roughly 1 kilometer east of Brussels Central Station is the European Quarter, the site of many EU institutions like the European Parliament. The city, while not officially the capital of the EU, is the seat of many EU institutions and does basically fill that role. About 5 kilometers to the northwest of the city center is the large site of Expo 58, which features the massive atomium structure that models an iron crystal. Pretty cool stuff. Finally, 10 kilometers to the northeast of the city center is Brussels Airport, which is connected to the city by mainline rail, but not the metro or trams, although the latter is coming soon in a few years' time. In fact, the coverage of a lot of key destinations in the city, from the European Quarter to the main business district, is actually surprisingly lacking in the metro and tram departments, though they are usually well served by frequent buses. Brussels' public transportation system is dominated by trams, which is perhaps unsurprising given the Belgian love affair with this type of train-adjacent transit. In fact, there's actually a tram route which runs the entire length of the Belgian coast, which I did a previous video on. Moreover, for reasons we'll see shortly, you can't look at Brussels Metro without also looking at the trams. Brussels' tram system is big, at nearly 150 kilometers in length, and extends all over the city, providing a lot of coverage. The network is run by STIB MIVB, doubly named because French and Dutch, who also operate the metro and buses in the city. Owing to its history, the system is also highly varied. Today, trams are all double-ended, although like as I mentioned with Berlin, some were single-ended as of about a decade ago. But unlike in Berlin, all trams have doors on both sides, allowing for both side and island platforms without any crazy crossover tracks. Brussels is a great example of a city that has progressively converted its tram system to modern standards, removing turning loops over time when termini are reconstructed, although there are still a number of loops still left in the system. As with most modern tram systems, the network runs on standard gauge tracks with a 750-volt DC overhead power supply. Some of Brussels' newest trams, the Flexities from Bombardier, look quite iconic in their copper color, with angular windows and prominent truck covers, and a few of them were actually shipped to Vancouver, my hometown, for use on the Olympic Line streetcar for the 2010 Olympic Winter Games, which is fun, though incredibly random. Things actually get weirder for Brussels trams though, because they flow directly into the metro system. You see, Brussels took a rather unique approach to building its metro, and that's with various pre-metro lines. In some ways, this reminds me of Amsterdam's failed tram-metro hybrid line to the southwest, and it will be far from the only Amsterdam metro comparison I make, even if I think Brussels does have the better system. Pre-metro lines took busy sections of the tram network and moved them underground, overhead lines and all, but with much larger stations than necessitated by the trams. This meant that the pre-metro tunnels could be repurposed for future metro lines when trams could no longer meet capacity needs, and it wasn't just the tunnels which could be reused. Pre-metro stations are not only designed to handle metro trains in the future, but actually only accommodate trams using small lowered cutouts from what will eventually be the metro platforms. So the eventual conversion to metro is quite thoroughly considered. You might even argue that the trams are simply guests in the House of Metro. Today, several tram routes run through yet-to-be-converted Premetro tunnels, such as the 3 and 4 routes which travel north-south underground through central parts of the city, between the northern and southern mainline rail stations. There's also the north-south Premetro portion of the Orbital 7 tram route. As it turns out, all of these tram routes are designated as chrono routes, which are kind of like metro tram routes in Berlin, featuring low-floor vehicles and high frequencies, appropriate for their metro-like infrastructure. What's interesting is that pre-metro routes like the one that carries the 3 and 4 are not built with no consideration to intermediate tram operation. And so, in the case of a portion of the route passing under the South Station, there's actually a complex junction that allows a number of other tram routes to dip below ground to use a short section of tunnel from the pre-metro to serve underground platforms at the station. Meanwhile, at the north end of the line, additional tracks and platforms were provided to enable a tram-to-tram cross-platform transfer at the North Station, and additional terminating platforms further south. And as it turns out, Brussels used to have 2 other major sections of Premetro, including one traveling east-west through the center of the city and another forming a corner between the 2 other routes, running east-west and then turning north-south. Both of these Premetro routes were actually already converted to full metro, something which happened just a few years after the first east-west Premetro was opened in the mid-1970s, and around a decade later for the corner route. During conversion to metro, a number of things change. While the tracks remain at standard gauge, Brussels metro trains are powered by a 900-volt DC third rail, and have much more sophisticated signaling than the trams. The newest trains used on the Brussels metro are composed of 6 cars and are around 100 meters long. Those newest trains are built by CAF, which has really come flying into the Belgian transit market with tons of trams, as well as trams for the Netherlands and, you guessed it, trains for the Amsterdam metro. The east-west Premetro line would eventually become M1, which runs from the West Station through the old Premetro tunnels in the center to the east-northeast of the city. Because a significant part of the Premetro that the M1 later took over was built cut and cover in the dense and historic center, the line winds and meanders quite a lot, something which it continues to do, albeit more gently, into the suburbs to the east. Of course, a connection is also provided to the current north-south Premetro in the city center, as well as to mainline trains at Brussels Central. Again, much like its low-country sibling of Amsterdam, the Brussels Metro has a number of lines, which share common trackage as well as a loop, and so much of the M1 overlaps with the M5, which runs beyond the West Station to suburbs to the southwest and diverges to the southeast from M1 east of the city center, popping above ground in what is the longest above-ground section of the whole network, running alongside a mainline railway and in the middle of a wide roadway. The eastern junction of the M1 and M5 is quite interesting, as the last station before the split actually has stacked platforms, allowing trains an easy flyover to either branch. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Brussels Metro does have a lot of rather odd operating patterns, and long has, and because of this, it has a lot more odd pocket tracks and crossovers than most metro systems, allowing for turnarounds and on-the-fly service adjustments. The corner Premetro was much like the first Premetro converted to full metro, in this case M2, just a few years after opening, and it now comprises the eastern and northern portions of the looping line. This line, as expected, encircles much of the central parts of Brussels, connecting twice with the current north-south Premetro as well as with M1 and M5, while also connecting to the West Station and Brussels South. While M2 does end where it begins in the northern part of the central city, the termini are at a 90-degree angle to each other, and unlike in cities such as Hamburg, cannot actually operate a looping service pattern at high frequencies, and some might not even feel that M2 should qualify as its own line, because as it turns out, the line is entirely a subset of the longer M6 route, which continues on the left side of the loop and terminates at the exhibition grounds not far from the Atomium. The M2 and M6 have a lot of tricks up their sleeves. For one, both interchange stations with the north and south Premetro have Spanish solution platforms, which increases capacity and allow the doors on both sides of the metro trains to be used. There's also a cross-platform transfer between the north-south Premetro and the M2 and M6 at the South Station, which is a real mess of underground tram and metro tracks. There's also a cross-platform transfer at Beacon Station, just north of Brussels West Station, which allows passengers traveling into the city on M6 or M5 to change to the other city-bound route without going up or down. This is actually the remnant of a very strange original arrangement of the northwestern branch of the system, which was entirely separate from the city loop for much of its existence, and instead served trains crossing the city on the route of what is today M1 and M5. During this operation, trains would enter Beacon Station's outer platforms, and then reverse back out, serving the northwestern branch on the left side as opposed to the rest of the network, which has right-side traffic. This arrangement was changed in the 2000s when the northwestern branch was integrated with the City Loop, but the wrong direction travel was maintained, and continues until just east of Brussels South Station, where the tracks uncross, similar to the interconnected portions of the Seoul Metro and Core Rail in that city or the Victoria Line in London. Today, the Brussels Metro boasts 59 stations, over 40 kilometers of track, and thick coverage of the city centre, as well as surprisingly good coverage of the suburbs to the east and west. The system is also set for a lot of growth, and has been planned in a remarkably forward-thinking way, with tons of space reserved for more future underground tram infrastructure and tram improvements designed to ease the path to metro, as well as of course metro infrastructure designed for a future better metro system, like it's seen at Bekannt. And that forward thinking is often turned into forward action. The big project of the day, which means the north-south Premetro is actually already no more, is the creation of the new M3 route, which was originally meant to open this year, but unfortunately has been delayed until 2030 for the first portion of the line. This new metro line will run from southeast of the city centre through Brussels South Station, where the cross-platform transfer with M2 and M6 will be maintained, and then through the city centre, where several new Spanish solutions are ready to go, and then to the North Station, where cross-platform interchange will again be maintained, but this time to trams. From here, the M3 will cut a new route to the northeast, where it will run to the edge of the city. And the M3 has been planned thoughtfully. Not only will the cross-platform transfers north and south of the city centre remain, but a rerouting of the metro just north of Brussels South will allow some key parts of that existing underground tram infrastructure to remain to continue serving other tram routes. The line's also nicely planned to connect to a number of suburban trams and to fill in gaps in coverage to the north of the city. And this isn't likely to be the end of the metro for Brussels. For one, M3 is nicely set up to run further to the south, filling yet another gap in the rapid transit network in an area dense with tram. And there's also the north-south Premetro currently used by Tram Route 7, which could someday form a great ring around the city, connecting the various metro corridors outside of the city centre. There are also long-term plans for platform screen doors and automation, further improving and modernizing the network. As Europe's capital, Brussels naturally has an S-train system, which was built as part of a construction project called RER, to balance out the demands of transit lovers from across the continent. The system, which is still in its early days, features low platforms, 3,000-volt overhead power, and an impressive 12 lines. I say the system is in its early days because at the moment, most S-train services in the Brussels region run just once or twice an hour, and this is further complicated by the dense web of tracks in the city centre, which has 4 different north-south mainline rail corridors running through it, to complement the 3 different east-west metro lines. Actually building out the RER network into something that deserves this title will be a long and expensive process, with lots of track expansion, station reconfigurations, and other work that naturally reminds me of Toronto with its own RER system. With all of these improvements though, suburban trains will eventually mostly get off long-distance tracks, and most lines will be able to run every 15 minutes or better. But this isn't a hypothetical project, and work is already well underway. Already, a major piece of infrastructure known as the Schumann-Josaphat Tunnel has opened, linking 2 of the north-south city center rail corridors and enabling more service between the airport and the European corridor, which is in high demand for obvious reasons. This project is minor in the scope of the overall RER program, but is incredibly impressive, and involved digging a new rail tunnel under dense historic areas directly nestled under an existing road tunnel, and right through an existing metro station. All of this means that Brussels is quite the transit city, and only going to get more interesting in the future, with more tram, train, and of course metro. Thanks for watching.